Clint Eastwood pushed open the door of the Hog's Breath Saloon in Carmel, California, and immediately knew he'd made a mistake. The bar was packed wall-to-wall with leather-clad bikers, at least 40 of them, members of the Mongols Motorcycle Club, who'd ridden up from Los Angeles for a weekend rally. The air was thick with cigarette smoke, cheap beer, and testosterone. Every head in the place turned to look at him, and then someone recognized him. Well. A massive biker with a beard down to his chest called out, "Look who just walked in. It's Dirty Harry himself." The bar erupted in mocking laughter. Clint stood in the doorway, his hand still on the handle, calculating his options. He could turn around and walk out. Nobody would blame him. There were 40 of them and one of him, and these weren't the kind of guys who asked for autographs politely. But Clint Eastwood didn't become a legend by backing down. So instead of leaving, he did something that would either make him a hero or get him killed. He walked straight to the bar, sat down on a stool between two of the biggest bikers, and ordered a beer. This is the story of the night Clint Eastwood proved that sometimes the toughest guy in the room isn't the one with the most muscles or the loudest mouth. Sometimes it's the one with the coldest nerve and the willingness to call everyone's bluff. To understand what happened that night in 1988, you need to understand who Clint Eastwood was at that point in his life. He wasn't just a movie star anymore. He transcended that. He was an icon, a living legend who defined American masculinity for an entire generation. He was Dirty Harry, the man with no name, the cowboy who shot first and asked questions never. But Clint had also just finished serving as mayor of Carmel, a sleepy coastal town where the biggest controversy was usually about building permits and tree trimming. He'd bought the Hog's Breath Saloon a few years earlier, a dive bar that he'd slowly been transforming into a respectable restaurant. It was his passion project, his escape from Hollywood. The Hog's Breath was Clint's sanctuary. He'd come here after long days of filming, sit at the bar, drink a beer, and just be a normal guy. No cameras, no interviews, no pressure. Just Clint and whoever happened to be drinking that night. But on this particular Saturday, in August 1988, normal went out the window the moment the Mongols rolled into town. The Mongols Motorcycle Club wasn't just any biker gang. They were one of the most notorious outlaw clubs in California, rivals to the Hells Angels, known for violence, drug trafficking, and a complete disregard for authority. When they decided to have a rally somewhere, smart people stayed home and locked their doors. Clint had been at home that evening when his bar manager, a guy named Rick Patterson, called him in a panic. "Clint, we've got a problem. The Mongols just took over the bar. There's like 40 of them. They're getting drunk, getting rowdy, and they're scaring away all the regular customers. I don't know what to do." Clint could hear the chaos in the background, loud voices, breaking glass, raucous laughter. "Did you call the police?" he asked. "Yeah, but they said they're understaffed tonight. Some big accident on Highway 1. They can't send anyone for at least an hour, maybe 2. Clint, these guys are tearing the place apart. What should I do?" There was a long pause. Clint looked at his watch. It was 9:30 p.m. He was tired. He'd been working on a script all day and was planning to go to bed early. The smart thing to do would be to tell Rick to just let them drink, keep them happy, and clean up the mess tomorrow. But Clint Eastwood had never been good at doing the smart thing. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said, and hung up. Clint's longtime girlfriend at the time, actress Frances Fisher, was staying with him that weekend. When she heard what was happening, she begged him not to go. "Clint, those are dangerous people. Let the police handle it. You could get hurt." Clint pulled on his jacket and grabbed his car keys. "It's my bar, Frances. I'm not going to let a bunch of thugs trash it while I sit at home doing nothing. At least take someone with you. Call your security guy." But Clint shook his head. "I don't need security. I'll be fine." Frances watched him drive away, convinced she'd never see him alive again. The drive from Clint's house to the Hog's Breath took exactly 8 minutes. The whole way there, Clint thought about what he was going to do. He wasn't stupid. He knew he couldn't physically fight 40 bikers. He was 58 years old, in good shape for his age, but not invincible. If this turned into a brawl, he'd lose badly. But Clint had learned something over his decades in Hollywood, something that had served him well in every tough situation he'd ever faced. Most confrontations aren't won with fists. They're won with attitude, with presence, with the absolute refusal to show fear. And if there was one thing Clint Eastwood knew how to do, it was refuse to show fear. When he pulled up to the Hog's Breath, the parking lot was full of motorcycles. Harleys mostly, big chrome machines that probably cost more than most people's cars. They were parked haphazardly, blocking the entrance, making it clear that the Mongols owned this space now. Clint parked his Mercedes at the edge of the lot and sat there for a moment, listening to the noise coming from inside the bar. Loud music, shouting, the crash of breaking glass. He could turn around right now. Nobody would know. Nobody would blame him. But that wasn't who Clint Eastwood was. He got out of the car and walked toward the entrance. As he got closer, he could see through the windows. The bar was chaos. Bikers everywhere, some playing pool, some arm wrestling, some just drinking and getting loud. His staff looked terrified, huddled behind the bar, trying to keep up with drink orders while staying out of the way. Clint pushed open the door and stepped inside. The effect was immediate. The nearest bikers saw him and did a double take. Then they elbowed their buddies. Within seconds, the entire bar had gone quiet, everyone turning to stare at the man who'd just walked in. Clint stood just inside the doorway, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light, taking in the scene. The place was trashed. Tables were overturned, chairs were broken. There was beer and broken glass everywhere. This wasn't just rowdy drinking. This was deliberate destruction. The big biker with the chest-length beard, clearly the leader of this crew, stood up from his table and walked toward Clint. He was enormous, probably 6 feet 5 inches, and 280 pounds of muscle and attitude. His leather vest was covered in patches, including the Mongols' distinctive logo and several that indicated he'd done time in prison. "Can I help you, old man?" the biker said, stopping about 3 feet from Clint. Clint looked up at him without expression. "Yeah, you can help me. You can get your boys together and get the hell out of my bar." The bar erupted in laughter. The big biker grinned, showing missing teeth. "Your bar? This is your bar." "That's what I said." The biker looked around at his crew, playing to the crowd. "Boys, you hear this? Dirty Harry owns this shithole, and he wants us to leave." More laughter. The biker turned back to Clint. "Here's the thing, Harry. We're having a good time. We're celebrating. My brother just got out of Folsom after 8 years. So we're not leaving. Not until we're good and ready." Clint didn't move, didn't blink, didn't show any reaction at all. He just stared at the biker with those cold blue eyes that had stared down countless movie villains. "I'm going to say this one more time. Get out of my bar. Now." The grin faded from the biker's face. "Or what? What are you going to do, old man? You going to shoot us with your little .44 Magnum?" He reached out and poked Clint in the chest with one meaty finger. "This ain't the movies, Harry. You're just an actor. You're not really tough. You're not really a cop. You're just a guy who pretends for the cameras." Everything Clint had learned over 5 decades, every character he'd played, every dangerous situation he'd navigated in real life, all of it came together in that moment. He didn't flinch when the biker poked him, didn't step back, didn't show any sign of intimidation whatsoever. Instead, Clint smiled. It was the coldest, most unsettling smile anyone in that bar had ever seen. And then he said, in that low, gravelly voice that had become iconic, "You're right. I'm not a cop. I don't have a badge. I don't have a gun. But you know what I do have." The biker waited, unsure where this was going. "I have ownership papers to this building, which means I can call the fire marshal right now and report that there are 40 people in a bar with a maximum capacity of 60, all of them drunk, half of them probably in violation of parole, in a building that I'm about to report has faulty wiring. Want to guess how fast this place gets shut down and every single one of you gets arrested?" The bar had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching the standoff. Clint continued, his voice never rising, never showing anger, just cold calculation. "Or maybe I call the IRS and report that I've been serving alcohol to people who haven't been paying their tabs. That triggers an audit of everyone. Want them looking into your finances. Want them asking where all your money comes from." The biker's jaw tightened. He wasn't grinning anymore. "Or maybe," Clint said. And this is my favorite option. I just go outside, get in my car, drive home, and burn this place to the ground for the insurance money. Because that's easier than dealing with you assholes. And then I build something new. Something better. And you get nothing but the memory of the night you trashed Clint Eastwood's bar and got nothing for it but ashes. He let that sink in for a moment, then added, "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your celebration somewhere else. You're going to leave right now, quietly, without breaking anything else. And in exchange, I won't make any phone calls. I won't press charges for the damage, and we'll call it even. You walk away, I walk away, and everybody lives to ride another day." The big biker stared at Clint for a long moment. You could feel the tension in the room, thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Would the biker back down? Would he escalate? Would this turn into violence? And then the biker did something unexpected. He started laughing. Not mocking laughter this time. Real laughter. The kind that comes from genuine surprise and respect. "You got balls, old man. I'll give you that." He turned to his crew. "All right, boys. The party's over. Let's roll out." There were grumbles, protests from some of the younger bikers who wanted to keep the confrontation going. But the leader silenced them with a look. "I said we're leaving. Mount up." The Mongols finished their beers, some of them leaving money on the bar, others not. They filed out one by one, engines roaring to life in the parking lot. Within 5 minutes, the bar was empty except for Clint, his terrified staff, and the wreckage. Rick Patterson came out from behind the bar, his face pale. "Holy shit, Clint. I thought they were going to kill you." Clint walked to the bar and poured himself a beer from the tap. His hands were steady, not a tremor. "They were never going to kill me, Rick. They were just testing me, seeing if I'd back down. What if they hadn't left? What if they'd called your bluff?" Clint took a long drink of his beer. "Then I would have burned the place down. I wasn't bluffing." Rick stared at him, not sure if he was serious or not. With Clint, you could never really tell. The story of that night spread through Carmel like wildfire. By the next day, everyone in town knew that Clint Eastwood had faced down 40 Mongols bikers and walked away without a scratch. The legend grew with each retelling. Some versions had Clint pulling a gun. Others had him physically fighting the leader. None of those versions were true, but they spoke to how the incident had captured people's imaginations. The truth was simpler, but, in some ways, more impressive. Clint had walked into a dangerous situation armed with nothing but nerve and intelligence. He'd assessed his opponent, figured out what leverage he had, and used it. No violence, no heroics, just cold, calculated intimidation. That's what made Clint Eastwood different from the characters he played. Dirty Harry would have shot someone. The man with no name would have drawn a gun. But real-life Clint was smarter than his characters. He knew that the real power wasn't in violence. It was in the willingness to accept consequences that other people weren't willing to accept. Burning down his own bar for insurance money? Most people would never even consider it. But Clint had said it with such conviction that the bikers believed he'd actually do it. And maybe he would have. That's what made the threat credible. A week after the incident, Clint was back at the Hog's Breath having dinner when a motorcycle pulled up outside. He tensed for a moment, wondering if the Mongols were back for round 2. But when the rider walked in, Clint saw it was the big biker with the beard, alone this time. The biker walked over to Clint's table and stood there awkwardly, like a kid called to the principal's office. "Mr. Eastwood, I wanted to apologize for the other night. We got out of hand. It wasn't right." Clint gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit down." The biker sat, looking uncomfortable in the upscale surroundings now that he was sober and alone. "What's your name?" Clint asked. "Marcus. Marcus Delgado." "Well, Marcus, you want a beer?" Marcus looked surprised. Sure. Yeah, I'd like that." Clint ordered 2 beers, and they sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Marcus said, "Look, I know we caused a lot of damage. I want to pay for it. I got some money saved up. Won't cover everything, but it's a start." Clint studied him. "Why?" "Because it's the right thing to do. And because—" Marcus hesitated. "Because you earn my respect. Most guys in your position would have called the cops. hidden behind lawyers and bodyguards. But you came down here yourself. You faced us down. That took guts. Clint smiled slightly. You know what I think, Marcus? I think you and your boys were just blowing off steam. I think you're not as bad as you want people to believe. Am I right? Marcus looked down at his beer. My brother just did 8 years for something he didn't do. Wrong place, wrong time. But he's got the club patches, so the jury convicted him anyway. He missed his kids growing up. Missed everything. So yeah, we were blowing off steam. Doesn't excuse it, but that's what it was. Tell you what, Clint said. You bring your brother by here for dinner, on the house. Just the two of you, no club. Let him have a nice meal. Celebrate being free the right way. And we'll call it even on the damages. Marcus looked up, surprised. Seriously. But if you guys ever pull that shit again, in my bar or anywhere else in this town, I'll make good on every threat I made. Understood. Marcus stood up and extended his hand. Understood. And thank you, Mr. Eastwood. They shook hands, and Marcus left. Clint never saw him again, but he heard through the grapevine that the Mongols made a point of avoiding Carmel after that. Not because they were afraid of Clint, but because they respected him. And respect, Clint had learned over a lifetime, was more valuable than fear. Years later, when asked about the incident in an interview, Clint downplayed it as usual. Just a bunch of guys having a loud night. We talked it out. No big deal. But the people who were there that night knew better. They'd seen something rare. A moment when genuine courage, the kind that doesn't require violence or bravado, won the day. A moment when Clint Eastwood proved that the toughest guy in the room isn't always the biggest or the loudest. Sometimes he's the one who walks into a room full of enemies with nothing but confidence and walks out without throwing a single punch. The Hog's Breath Saloon is still standing in Carmel today. Clint sold it years ago, but remains a landmark, a place where locals and tourists gather to drink and eat and occasionally to hear the story of the night Clint Eastwood faced down 40 bikers and won with nothing but nerve. That's the real Clint Eastwood, not the characters he played, but the man behind them. A man who understood that true strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how calmly you can face danger, how intelligently you can assess a situation, and how willing you are to accept consequences that would terrify most people. On that August night in 1988, Clint Eastwood didn't need Dirty Harry's gun or the man with no name's quick draw. He just needed to be himself. And that was more than enough.